Rosatom says it is ready to begin the second phase of evacuating its employees from Iran's nuclear power plant. Head of Rosatom, Alexei Lishav, told reporters that staff will soon be relocated to safe locations away from the site. He added that construction work at the plant has been suspended due to the current situation. However, some employees continue to maintain crucial equipment and carry out tasks that cannot be interrupted. Likachev emphasized that the situation around the plant remains difficult. He also noted that no strikes have been reported at the plant, the construction site, or employee housing areas. Rosatom is monitoring the situation closely to ensure the safety of all staff and the facility. We're now being joined by Dr. Gilbert Doctorow, who's a Russian affairs expert, joining us from Brussels. Thank you so much for joining us here today on NewsX World. As we've just heard that all crucial personnel are still maintaining essential equipment at the plant. How risky is it to keep even a minimal workforce at a nuclear power facility during escalating military tensions right now?
I don't think the Russians are bearing much risk. If Israel or the United States were to directly attack these facilities, then Russia would be in the war on the side of Iran, which would be devastating for U.S. and Israeli forces.
If hostilities between Iran and Israel continue, which is looking likely as we're going into as we are now in the second week of this conflict, what are the potential global consequences if a nuclear power plant like this one accidentally or deliberately targeted?
As I said, it's improbable that either Israel or the United States would, at the present level of hostilities, dare to touch these nuclear installations. Israel has nuclear installations also. The Iranians have every possibility of attacking them and decimating the state of Israel with radioactive poisoning. So it would be utter madness for either country to attack the Iranian nuclear installations at this point in the war.
Mm-hmm. And even though no strikes have been reported so far, what contingency plans should international nuclear authorities and regional governments consider to prevent nuclear safety or environmental disaster as this conflict intensifies?
They can consider all they like, but the international authorities have zero weight. As we know from the inspections they made in Ukraine over the Ukrainian attacks on nuclear installations, which they tried to blame on the Russians. And the inspectors came and more or less said nothing because they dare not for political reasons. Therefore, we can exclude completely all of the discussions taking place in these authorities. They have no value.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Dr. Gilbert. Please stay with us as we will be back shortly. The European Union will hold its oil and gas coordination groups. This comes amid a surge in global oil prices. The groups will assess the impact of the Middle East conflict on energy supplies. They will review the latest reports from all 27 EU member states. EU nations are required to maintain oil stocks covering 90 days of consumption. These coordination groups include government representatives who monitor oil and gas security. They also plan crisis response measures if supplies are disrupted. The meeting aims to ensure energy stability across the European bloc. We're now being joined again by Dr. Gilbert Doctorow. Thank you for joining us back here. So as we just heard, the European Union is convening its oil and gas coordination groups amid surging energy prices. How vulnerable is Europe's energy security to escalating tensions in the Middle East?
Europe is very vulnerable, and they brought this upon themselves. If they have a discussion about relenting on their ban of Russian sources, energy sources, then they have to realize that Mr. Novak, the deputy prime minister of Russia, and for more than 10 years, the energy minister of Russia, has said that Russia may very well refuse to provide any supplies to Europe at present conditions. The problem with the EU position, which you have cited, is they're behaving like Donald Trump. They're behaving as if they're in control of the situation, which is utter nonsense. The Russians have the upper hand here, not the European Union. And if they think that by making a concession of allowing Russian energy supplies at something like a $67 or $70 cap per barrel to enter the European Union, they better think again, because the Russians will refuse them flatly. The Russians can ship these same energy resources to the Far East for $100 a barrel. And why would they make any concessions to Europe when Europe remains an open enemy, simply undeclared war?
And with global oil prices reacting sharply to the conflict involving Iran, Israel and the US, how prepared are European economies to absorb prolonged volatility in energy markets?
They're not at all prepared. As I said, they brought this down on themselves. First by their green agenda, which cut off their nuclear facilities, which cut off coal burning generation. They have brought this crisis on themselves, not to mention the utterly ideological decision to stop importing Russian energy sources. They have created this situation of high vulnerability. They were so proud, Ursula von der Leyen was so proud to have replaced Russian gas with Qatari gas. Well, what does she have now? Nothing. So Europe is going to feel great pain in the coming weeks and months because of their completely wrong-minded and ideological-driven, rather than pragmatic approach to their own needs.
And beyond emergency stockpiles and coordination meetings, what long-term strategies should the EU adopt to protect its energy stability in an increasingly unpredictable environment right now?
Well, the environment isn't unpredictable, it's completely predictable. Oil is now $118 a barrel, it's going to go to $200 a barrel. You don't have to be a genius to understand that. Even the Financial Times or the BBC are saying that very thing. The consequence for European economy will be not a recession, but a depression. If they want to save their necks, they will go to the Russians and not say how kindly we will accept some LNG shipments from you. They will say we will reopen right now the Nord Stream 1 pipeline, which probably will take 2 weeks to do, and will solve their energy problem at once. But for that to happen, we have to have some political changes in Europe. The people who have brought this catastrophe on Europe should be removed by a vote of parliament. And I have in mind Ursula von der Leyen and Kaja Kallas. They are singly responsible for the present disaster.
Thank you so much, Dr. Gilbert Doctorow, for joining us here today on NewsX World.